Hi there, I'm Dr. Karen Janes, a psychologist and energy healer in the UK, and welcome to the Life Made Easier podcast. Here you'll find ancient wisdom with a modern approach. In each episode, we'll be sharing useful information from the world of energy healing, developing ways to enhance your energy intelligence, and helping you make your life easier in simple and practical ways.
And I am her compatriot, Dr. Tiffany Hunter, an energy healer in the United States. We've been talking for the last few episodes about emotions, and this episode we're going to be doing that too. And in this one, we're going to be talking about how emotions can be used as your superpower and your friend. They can be used to guide decisions, be your compass, fueling goals, and basically just feeling comfortable in your own skin. Emotions really are the pathways to so many things. And as always, when we're talking about emotions, things can get triggered and things can become difficult. So go gently with yourself and get the support you need for yourself to be able to be comfortable with all this information. Before we start, just to recap some basics, in case you didn't listen to the other episodes. And that, first and foremost, is that there are two kinds of experiences that are often confused as being the same. One is a body reaction, which is an emotion. They tend to be simple and very straightforward: happy, sad, angry, fearful. And the other tend to be convoluted, complicated, and sort of never ending, and they haunt us and go round and round in our heads and create the monkey mind. And we call those mental reactions, and those tends to be things like self-righteousness and frustration and things like that. Things that disappointment, guilt, things that an animal would not be feeling. My dog might get very pouty and angry with me when she doesn't get what she wants, but she's never going to feel like I've let her down, so to speak, or that I've disappointed her. We also talked previously a little bit about how to connect to them, how to identify which is an emotional response and which is a mental response so that you can identify them, and then how to start. And then understanding that most of the reason for having a mental reaction is to avoid an emotional one, and how we can start connecting to those emotional ones so that we can release them, get rid of the monkey mind, get rid of those self-criticisms, and live a life that is more peaceful and has much more joy in
That sounds like a wonderful goal.
it.
I want to do that.
Make it sound so simple, right? We're gonna
Yeah,
do that. We're all gonna do that. Let's do it together. We'll be done
yeah.
in 45 minutes.
How often do we say to people, emotions are often very simple, but that doesn't mean they're easy? Um,
Oh, it's not
so
easy.
one of the things that occurs to me that we haven't really talked about very much, and we've talked about this vague sense of like mental reactions being in the mind and physical emotions being more in our bodies, but we haven't really talked in more detail about what we might feel in our body when we are more connected to an emotion. And given that we also know that for some people, they may feel quite a sense of disconnection to their own bodies, sometimes on a very physical level, but certainly in terms of how they feel. And what often happens in a kind of therapy or healing room is you ask somebody how they feel and or what they're feeling, and you'll get a big long story about something. And the reason for that is because we may not know. And usually a feeling, because it can be a one or two word answer, as soon as someone's launches into a big description, that's kind of a clue that they're not really connecting with the emotion. So most people mostly feel their emotions anywhere kind of in their torso, so kind of from the throat down to the belly, really broadly speaking. So and we have a lot of descriptions that clue us into this. So I've got butterflies, I've got a lump in my throat, my chest is really tight. Those are kind of all ways of describing the kind of physical sensation of an emotion. And because we feel in our physical bodies something that is actually in our energy system, we don't exactly feel our energy system as such. We feel a physical sensation of it. It can be really hard to separate out the purely physiological experience and an energetic one, and maybe we don't really need to. But there are also physiological reasons why we might get certain sensations. So when we are afraid, our heart rate increases. That can make us feel, that thumping in our chest that we might associate with fear or panic. Or the butterflies can come from when our the fight or flight part of our nervous system gets triggered. Less blood flow goes to the stomach and the digestion, because if there is a lion there about to eat you, you do not need to digest your last meal. You can do that later. You need all your blood supply and resources to be going to your big muscles, your brain, to help you run away or stay and fight if you have to, and make those snap decisions to do that for your survival. So we might start to feel real sensations in our bellies, or in our chest, or where our breathing changes. So there's a lot of physiological things going on that cause some of those sensations. But even things like, people will talk about heartbreak. Now, the physical organ of our heart isn't usually broken when we talk about that, but it feels there can be a very physical pain in your chest. When we're feeling a bit more afraid, perhaps you might notice your shoulders kind of hunch up, or you round your back a little bit. We do things that instinctively protect our vulnerable organs when we feel under threat. And so you can see how there's very clear physical reasons why we might have some of these sensations. But by beginning to pay a bit more attention to some of these sensations, and knowing that these sensations might indicate an emotion, can help take us a big step along the way to getting better at identifying our emotions and not suppressing them so much. So in a previous episode, Tiffany talked about oysters creating a pearl from the sand that can get into their shells and cause them problems. And we can have all these kind of little pearls of emotions that we've tucked away. Even though right now you may not be able to do much with the old stored ones, there's a lot you can do to stop yourself storing more. So being more connected to your emotions in the moment and releasing them.
Yeah, and I have many conversations with people who are simply not able to identify what their emotion is. And there's some simple things, again, not easy, but simple things that we can do that you can do that might help. First and foremost, just acknowledging that you have them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And being able to identify and recognize when you're either suppressing them or intellectualizing them into a more complicated reaction, or you're labeling them, but you're not really feeling them. But it can also really help to write in a journal, write it down, write a letter to yourself, write a letter to somebody else, because what you're doing is you're giving yourself something to do that slows you down and allows that emotion to come forward. It's not easy to just, it's a bit like newbie meditators, but I'm just going to sit down and go, what is my emotion? What is my emotion? Right? Am I meditating? What am I thinking? What am I thinking? It's really hard to do that. So having an activity that sort of supports part of you to allow that emotion to get larger and come forward in a safe way, and gives you time to recognize it, can be helpful. Meditation can do that. Journaling can do that. Talking to a friend can do that. Most people tend to be either external or internal processors, and external processors really need somebody else to talk to. Breathing exercises can do that. Dancing can do that. Walking on the beach and talking to the clouds can do that. Really anything that you can do to, like I said, give yourself time and space for that emotions to bubble up out of the body and be more obvious. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for the emotions, to allowing the emotions to increase in their volume so that it becomes more obvious to you and you can label them.
I was thinking as well about what kind of this idea, what's the purpose of our emotions? And, as we always say, there are no bad feelings, just ones we're more or less comfortable with usually. And our emotions serve a very direct purpose. So fear lets us know we may need to be cautious. We may need to pay more attention. It has its roots in survival and safety. Anger lets us know we're unhappy about something, and it can really help us to set healthier boundaries or propel us to kind of, make some important change. Sadness allows us to really acknowledge something is important, that did or didn't happen, and to, kind of process some of that emotional pain. And so, if we can start to think of our emotions as a kind of communication, I think then it can get a bit easier to do some of those things that Tiffany is talking about, to stay with it. In a previous episode, we talked about how more recent research has identified that a pure emotion only really lasts for about 90 seconds, but it's actually really hard to sit with it for that time. So anything you can do that helps you do that, and acknowledging this might be quite overwhelming. I may need to build up my kind of window of tolerance for how much sadness I can cope with, how much anxiety or fear I can cope with. And that's okay to take your time with that. But if you can breathe into it, or keep writing, or any of those things Tiffany has suggested, to stay with it long enough to allow yourself to keep feeling it until that wave of emotion can really crest and kind of discharge, then you can allow that emotion and the message that it kind of brought with it to guide you, and to see where maybe there are things you need to move on from, or change, or bring into your life, whatever it might be. And that, changes can be quite scary sometimes, but can also, really help us to start to feel differently within our lives, and feel a bit more in control, rather than just keep kind of being managed by our own life, and on a bit of a treadmill kind of feeling that we can easily have.
Yeah, I mean, the connection to to our emotions is the reason that we lay down memories. When we're walking through our life disconnected, our memory is severely compromised. And it's also completely oriented towards navigating as a guidance system about what we want, what we don't want. Do we want to turn left? Do we want to turn right? How do we feel about this? How do we feel about that? Um, and trigger warning to talk about the menstrual cycle, but I know somebody who, when she would talk about getting her menstrual cycle and getting PMS in America, PMT, I think, in England, if
Mm-hmm.
I remember correctly,
Yep.
um, she actually, one of the things she liked about that was that things that she didn't normally feel annoyed by, she felt annoyed. And it was this kind of refreshing experience of, during the month, she would be either suppressing it or kind of, allowing them to be speed bumps, but not really, the things that women do, right? You just kind of get on with it. But once a month, all these things had to be revisited because they were all incredibly, really, really hard. And she had to take a second look at whether or not she still wanted to continue to put up with it, basically, if it was still something, a direction she still wanted to go in her life. And it made a big difference. And without that connection to those emotions, we just don't know who we are, what we want, or what we want to do next about anything. And I think that's why people who are disconnected or intellectualizing feel not just lost in terms of making things happen in their lives, but also lost and trapped into the endless looping of their mental stuff.
Yeah,
And very much the
that's
way to get out of that is connect to the emotions. It's where the tire hits the road, right? It's where the rubber hits the road to get you moving forward, so that you're not just spinning your wheels.
yeah. And again, if this is something you find quite difficult, you may need some help with this, and that's okay. Like, again, simple but not necessarily easy. And it also strikes me that there's ways that our emotions can, even the ones that we commonly label as negative, or the ones we're most likely to avoid because they're uncomfortable, painful to feel, um, they can actually lead to real positives. So by using our anger to overcome to make a change about something, or to put down a boundary that we, a bit like you're talking about the person with the
Mm-hmm.
hormonal changes through the month that women, most women experience for much of their lives, and that moment where you go, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I mean, that can feel so empowering. And but if you hadn't let yourself feel angry about it, you might not have taken that step. Equally with fear, sometimes, that moment where our fight or flight system gets triggered is the moment where we go on high alert. Am I in danger? If we then realize we're not actually in danger, or we can pause a minute to sort of accurately assess the kind of risk. Actually, it's really tiny. We may come to a place where we realize that something, although it feels a little bit scary, it might not actually be dangerous, or the reward of doing it might, outweigh the potential small risk or whatever. I'm certainly not advocating people do really, death defying stuff or anything, unless that's really your thing. But that's kind of how we learn. If you think about children, like when they have those moments where they're like, oh, I did that, it was really scary, but I overcame it, and now you kind of almost see them puff up a little bit in themselves. I did that. I was, I went on stage in the school play, or even though I was really terrified and nothing bad happened. That's part of how we build resilience and strength and confidence in ourselves. And just to complete the set, because we talk about the four main emotions, and usually it's the three that cause us more trouble, not happiness. So sadness really can, when we feel sad about something, we know we really valued it. We know, it can help us to feel deep gratitude. With grief, when we lose somebody, if we don't really care about them, we don't feel grief, and that grief can be so painful. Sadness can be, a really painful emotion, but it can also help us to really have a sense of the things we value, which might again make us want to change some things. I actually, what is really important to me, and are there things that I need more of in my life, to feel more satisfied, with how things are. And sometimes sadness can help inform that. So that's where we can, instead of just thinking these emotions are just going to be painful and intense and difficult and scary and overwhelming, if we can get past those moments, we can come to the place of, what was that emotion communicating? What was it showing me? What value was there in that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I love what you're saying about how it can reframe what your current and even your past has looked like, as well
Mm.
as help you decide what your next steps are and where you want to go.
Which is
I,
also,
I
just pops into my head the whole thing about the toxic positivity, and I feel like I suddenly want to say something about that now, because I think the idea that we should always think positively and we should always be grateful, and
yes.
that's where this can get out of
Mhm.
balance, because what that misses is the feeling of, and the connecting to the emotion, that it's normal and healthy to feel angry. It is normal and healthy for our survival to feel afraid sometimes. It's normal and healthy to feel sad, when something sad happens. And then it's much easier to come to a place where we can be grateful and joyful and positive and happy, and but rather than trying to jump to that step without allowing ourselves the connection to the emotion.
Well, I mean, the other thing that toxic positivity does is very similar to suppression. It
Mm.
reduces the energy to neutral. And so instead
Yes.
of having that experience of the tires meeting the road and getting traction to do something, you're just spinning your wheels.
Mm.
You're just spinning
Mm.
your wheels.
And
You're just
kind of
kind of in
feeling
that
bad about
endless
it.
loop, and then feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even in something like sadness, which is such an uncomfortable feeling, that the energy that in those moments, as you say, can really help you have a perspective on what you value, what you're grateful for, which will could not only reframe how you've seen what you've had in your life, but also make different choices about what you currently have because of your priorities. But it can also galvanize all kind of action, like memorials and families that set up nonprofits in the name of their tragedies and things like that. It really is the energy behind these emotions is really and truly how we engage with the world and engage with ourselves. And when we suppress it or when we modify it into intellectualism or toxic positivity or just neutralize it to make it more comfortable, we're missing out on all those possibilities to do that.
Yeah, and one thing I also think is worth saying, and again, this comes very much from my experience of working with many people over the years, is you may well find that one of those three emotions that we typically think of as more difficult may be harder for you. Um, I think that, and this often kind of goes in families, sometimes even cultures, um, eh, where you might see a family who are always having blazing rows and shouting at each other, but no one's allowed to cry, or
Mm.
everybody's always very anxious and worried, but no one's allowed to get angry or cross. Or people who are, pouring emotion and feeling sad, but we can't be angry or we can't show fear. So it's quite likely that there will be one of those three emotions, maybe two, that I mean, whilst they might all feel quite difficult, there may be one that for you, or you might notice, I never feel angry. I've had people say that to me quite often. I never really get angry. Um, yeah,
As if
I
it's
don't.
as if it's an accomplishment.
Yeah, or sometimes less with sadness maybe, but with it also with yeah, I never feel fear. I'm kind of um, it's like it's for our survival that we feel fear. There is a biological, very sensible purpose to it. And and the same as we've described with all the others. But I think so if you have one that you're like, I never feel that's probably a clue that one might be a bit trickier for you. Um, and or, I mean, maybe you're lucky and you don't have anything in your life to get annoyed about, but there's plenty in the world that we
Yeah,
can
I
get.
don't think those people. If you get on the, I don't think that's available to a human.
Yeah. So, we won't feel all these emotions all the time, but they will come and go and they will be present. But don't be surprised if you find one is more of a struggle for you, one is more
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something so incredibly freeing about giving ourselves the self-acceptance to having a full range of our emotions. It is the ultimate in the radical self-acceptance.
Yeah,
And
it's kind of make I have the image of like a rainbow rather than having a monochrome world. It's like you get the
yeah,
full
yeah,
palette of colors. Yeah.
yeah. And it's really being able to do that is really the basis for ambition being completed
Mm,
and change happening. And as you said, setting boundaries and moving forward and all of these things that you and I hear all the time. People are coming to us looking for. I have
mm.
trouble with boundaries. I have trouble finding what I want. I have trouble not procrastinating. I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what I want to do with myself. Well, none of those things are really possible when those emotions are either, or I should, a better way of saying it would be all of those possibilities happen, the pathways through the emotion, being connected to the emotions, because that's how you galvanize that energy. That's how you understand your compass. That's how you know what direction you want to go in.
Yeah. That seems like a
What
really
makes you
good
happy, what
place.
doesn't make you happy.
It seems like a really good place to come to an end. But please do tell us if there's more stuff about emotions that you would like to hear about and kind of how you get on with some of this stuff, or if you need, if you have more questions, stuff you feel we haven't answered, please do get in touch. We always love to hear from you
Yeah,
about
I
how
mean,
things.
if you're listening to this, this is the first year of the podcast that we've been publishing these. So we're really learning how to figure out how to reproduce these things that we're doing and talking about in our clinic rooms with you guys, which is an audience that's kind of at arm's length. And so we want to know how you're getting on with it and how it's working so that we can answer questions and just get better at it.
Thank you
So
so
thank
much
you.
for joining us today, and we look forward to you being with us again next time.
Take care.
Hi, I'm Carol Smith, the producer of the Life Made Easier podcast. We hope today's episode gave you some meaningful tools and takeaways to help make your life feel a little lighter. You've reached the end of this episode, but not the end of the ways that you can support us. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, follow us on social media, and check out our Patreon for extra content and ways you can go deeper with us. There's also a whole library of episodes waiting for you to help increase your energy intelligence. Take care, and we'll see you on the next Life Made Easier.